Power armor. The US government's answer to battlefield superiority in a time of escalating tensions, resource wars, and the threat of nuclear conflict. Before the bombs hit, power armor was the pinnacle of defensive technology. After the Great War, power armor became a sign of everything society lost, but also a sign of power and survival in the Wasteland. So, how many kinds of power armor are there? Let's break it down with every single power armor model explained. T-45 power armor. Westtech first put power armor into production in 2065 due to severe lack of resources at the time. Instead of using heavy resources to deploy combat vehicles, the US military aimed to develop self-powered combat suits. These manned units would allow more mobility while also offering the ability to use heavy weapons. As the Chinese forces invaded Alaska in 2066, the US military was forced to rush the production of the first usable sets of power armor. The T-45 powered infantry armor was the first official power armor to be sent into battle. The model actually had a few flaws, including a vulnerable spot below the chest plate. Westtech knew about the flaw but still decided to release the armor. To no surprise, this led to the deaths of many US soldiers. But Westtech was bringing in millions, and the US had an edge in the war. The T-45 power armor gave soldiers enhanced strength, durability, and endurance against most types of damage found on the battlefield. As Westtech developed the T-45, they also developed the power armor frame, which would become the base for all future power armor models. While the T-45 units helped hold back the invading forces, these still weren't quite enough to win the war against China. T-51 power armor. 10 years after the Battle of Anchorage in Alaska began, Westtech unveiled a new armor line. In 2076, the T-51 went into mass production. It used the same frame as the T-45, saving both cost and resources. With boosted servos and a laser-reflective alloy, it was far more agile and protective against various types of damage. It had a polylaminate construction which made it far lighter than its predecessor, yet it could still withstand significantly high forces of kinetic impact. Troops who wore the T-51 power armor were no longer limited in their movements, offering a huge tactical advantage. While T-45 units helped defend Anchorage, it was the T-51 units that eventually stopped the invasion force. Naturally, the T-51 became the new standard armor. After reclaiming Alaska, the T-51 troops were redeployed to the Chinese mainland. While the T-51 series was considered the pinnacle of power armor design due to its Anchorage legacy, it wasn't actually the most advanced model in active use at the time. T-60 power armor. Behind the scenes, the US military and Westtech were already working on an even more powerful set of power armor, the T-60 series. With concerns over a possible second Chinese invasion, the US wanted something more reliable and resilient to defend the mainland. With so much death and loss during the 10-year Battle of Anchorage, you can understand why they did this. When the T-60 power armor rolled out, it was issued to domestic peacekeeping forces like the National Guard, and it was designed to act as the first line of defense. This new armor was a combination of the T-45 and T-51 armor designs, offering a very agile frame that was well equipped to deal with all forms of damage, even radiation. The T-60 was also more heavily armored, offering better protection to its operators. However, it still shared the T-45's weak spot below the chest plate. By the time of the Great War, the T-60 was considered the most technologically advanced power armor model to be extensively used in battle. But there was one last model made before the bombs fell. T-65 power armor. While the US was at war with China, it was also at war with itself. Civil unrest was at an absolute peak, and riots were erupting around the country. Miners from Appalachia were striking, stopping the production of needed materials. Being a US citizen at this time was absolute hell, with shortages of everything you can think of. The Secret Service, tasked with protecting the president, faced increasing threats from insurgent groups. This was when the T-65 power armor was developed. Built on the T-60 framework, the T-65 had additional layers and coating, making it the most protective power armor to date. Primarily designed to protect the president and his inner circle, the T-65 also offered the highest radiation resistance of any T-series model. However, it's arguably the worst looking set of power armor, with this next set arguably being the best. X-01 power armor. Just days before the Great War, development of a new set of power armor began. The X-01 power armor was commissioned by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who were the pre-war advisory board made up of the top military leaders in the US. With the nuclear war looming, the production of the X-01 was fast-tracked. However, only one suit was fully realized and given to the Nuka-Cola Corporation. While it wasn't 100% effective and functional, it was the proof of concept for this new model to be the next big advancement in power armor technology. Further development was made impossible due to the atomic bombs hitting, but the research plans for this armor were taken by the Enclave and preserved for future use. Full development of the X-01 Power Armor was restarted by the Enclave in 2198, but we'll get to those newer and more advanced designs a bit later. For now, let's just look at the base model, which was a prototype. While the commonly used T-51 models used lightweight polylaminate shells for protection, the X-01 model uses lightweight metal alloys that are reinforced with ceramic castings at key points on the frame. This saves space and allows for a smaller profile without compromising protection. But the main difference between the new X-01 armor and the previous T-Series is the helmet design. The insect-like design features a pair of polarized eyepieces in place of the usual slit, offering better battlefield awareness. These eyepieces also act as the suit's headlamps, replacing the typical lens attachment from the older T-Series models. It's one of the best features of this X-Series line. Another big difference is that the T-Series pauldrons were replaced with a large humped piece that encloses the operator's head. This better protects the head area from enemy fire. Advanced Power Armor Mark I. After decades of testing and development, the Enclave turned the base X-01 design into a fully functional and operational powerhouse. The Advanced Power Armor Mark I model became the standard issue for Enclave soldiers. With the Enclave being such a menacing presence, most people of the Wasteland feared this armor. The Enclave's primary goal was to eliminate every irradiated person. With the majority of the people above ground being affected by radiation, no one was safe from the Enclave soldiers. As I mentioned before, this model shared plenty of design features with the T-Series models, including an air conditioning system and a urine recycling system that allowed the operator to survive for weeks without water. However, it had some significant upgrades that improved on the T-Series. The Enclave used intimidation tactics to improve their superiority over the Wasteland, so the darker coloring made the armor look more menacing. The armor also had improved radiation resistance and mobility, allowing the Enclave soldiers to go deep into nuclear zones. Now, this power armor was a huge improvement on what came before it, but it actually didn't last too long. Advanced Power Armor Mark II. Under the order of Enclave President John Henry Eden, further development was to be done to improve the X-01 model. Just a short while after the Advanced Power Armor Mark I models were rolled out, the Advanced Power Armor Mark II models came to replace them. The Mark II was created with lightweight ceramic composites that provided more protection than the Mark I version. This model was also simply referred to as the Enclave Power Armor. Like the previous versions, it was made synonymous with Enclave soldiers. Up to this point in time, this was the last non-specialized set of power armor to be produced on a mass scale. But it wasn't the most feared set of power armor that the Enclave created. That achievement goes to the Hellfire Power Armor. The Enclave engineers started developing yet another set of power armor shortly after the Great War. A single prototype was in the possession of the Zax supercomputer overseer of Vault 51. However, the plans were recovered decades later by the Enclave under John Henry Eden. It was only used by the Enclave's most elite troops once it was rolled out, and it represented the second phase of the Enclave's plan to purify the Wasteland of all radiation and mutation. At this point in time, everyone knew the Enclave was the biggest threat, so the Hellfire power armor suits made the situation even more ominous. The idea was for the Hellfire operators to use flamers to burn the Wasteland into purity. The Hellfire power armor was heat resistant and artificially enhanced the strength of the operator. From what we know, the Hellfire power armor was the last innovation in the power armor line, with every other model in the Wasteland being adapted from the existing T-Series units and X-01 units. And while Enclave and Brotherhood of Steel heavily used power armor in their operations, they're not the only factions in the Wasteland to do so. NCR Power Armor. Hundreds of years after the bombs fell, a group of settlements that called themselves the New California Republic waged war against the Brotherhood of Steel. After pushing the Brotherhood back to their bunkers, the NCR scavenged many of the surviving T-45 power armor frames. They repurposed these into their own NCR power armor by removing the damaged joint servos. This allowed anyone to wear the armor without any specialized training, but it made it much heavier for any operator to control. Most NCR power armor models had the yellow NCR Bear logo on the chest plate and red stripes on the arms. The suits of armor basically became power armor without the power, and they were used by NCR heavy troopers in combat situations. The NCR power armor was definitely a much weaker version of any model we've seen so far, but there were even less powerful units being used out in the Wasteland. Raider Power Armor. With power armor being such a primary part of the build-up to the Great War, many units were left scattered around the world after the bombs fell. Whether they were left in facilities or out in the open, some models survived long enough for scavengers and raiders to make use of them. Several raiders were able to use scrap metal and other makeshift materials to repurpose these sets of power armor. While not nearly as powerful or threatening as their initial forms, they still put many raiders on a higher step of hierarchy. Some versions of Raider Power were also much better designed than others, such as the Overboss armor built by a raider leader named Coulter. This is definitely one of the better looking options. EXC-17 Excavator Power Armor. Not all power armor was designed with the intention of battle, with perhaps the most famous example of this being the EXC-17 Excavator Power Armor. Created by the Gallahan Mining Company before the Great War, this set of armor was designed to be used by miners working in the Appalachia region. It was equipped with enhanced joint servos that allowed greater strength and the ability to carry more materials than any other official power armor design. Some versions of the suit also improved the perception, allowing the operator to detect different ores to give miners better visibility. And that does it for every model of power armor in Fallout. Which version is your favorite, and what bit of Fallout lore should we cover next?